Hey everybody, it's your host, Diana Chen, and you're listening to an episode of Minihash, a condensed episode of Rehash where we do a deep dive into one focused topic with a past guest. Hope you enjoy. So let's go ahead and dive right on in. This is one of our first episodes of Minihash, which is a new segment of Rehash where we deep dive into one topic with a past guest in a more condensed episode. And so today we are speaking with Dennison Bertram about Tally Protocol, which just launched last week on the 20th, I believe. I always associate Tally with the home of DAO governance, and I'll give you a chance to speak more on that. But that's how I think of it in my head. And now there is a Tally protocol, which we're going to dive deep into. Also, just for people to know, Dennison first appeared on Rehash all the way back in season 3, episode 1. And as you all know, we are approaching season 9 now. So he's ancient. He's like an OG in Rehash. His original episode aired on September 8th, 2022. So almost 2 years ago. And if you want a little history about Tally or a little archaeology there, you can go back and listen to that episode, season 3, episode 1, and then come back and listen back to this and see how far we've come. But I'm so happy to have you back, Dennison, after almost 2 years.
Glad to be
and
here.
I just want to dive right into the Tally protocol, which just launched last week in partnership with Scopelift, the leading governance smart contract development team. We actually had a shout out for Scopelift recently on Amy Jung's episode at the end of season 8. So maybe we got to bring somebody from the Scopelift team onto the podcast so we can learn more about what it is. Because I'll be honest, I don't know too much about it beyond, their smart contract development team.
They're a wicked smart team.
Yeah. Well, nominations are open right now. So either you or somebody listening in the audience right now maybe can beat you to it and go give them a nomination right away. But to start out, Dennison, can you give us just a quick TLDR about what Tally is before the whole Tally protocol thing? And then we're going to do a deep dive on the Tally protocol.
Sure. So Tally is really the leading governance tool in the ecosystem. We power the largest, the most valuable protocols in the ecosystem. Really teams that are pushing everything forward, just pushing our industry forward. These are teams for like Arbitrum, ZK Sync, Wormhole, many others. And you can kind of think of us like the operating system for your decentralized organization, for your protocol, for your governance. We are the place where you operate your protocol, where you get things done collectively in a decentralized way.
And so last week you announced the Tally protocol. I was referring people back to your pinned tweet on your Twitter page where you kind of give a really good summary about what all of that entails. And I just want to go through that and really break it down with you, like from a DAO operator perspective. Like, what do they need to know about the Tally protocol? Why does Tally need a protocol? Maybe let's start there.
Yeah, so this is less about Tally and more about the ecosystem and the DAOs. So the question I think is, why do DAOs need a protocol? And the answer to that is basically we need to realign the incentives of DAOs. And we need to address kind of what is, in some ways you could think of like the original sin of DAOs, which is that DAO tokens are both instruments for voting, instruments for governance, and speculative financial assets, right? DAO tokens, you can both vote with them and you can use them like money, but you can't do both at the same time. And this tension actually creates a lot of problems for DAOs down the road, right? The problems that arise from this are the price of a DAO token very much now influences the governance of the DAO, and the governance of the DAO influences the price of the token. And a great example of how this breaks down is when the price of a token goes to 0, the DAO is dead, right? Because nobody cares, and or it's trivially cheap to purchase all the DAO tokens to rug the treasury, destroy the protocol. But what happens is that the other side of the problem, when the DAO token goes to, I like to call it infinity, when it goes to its maximum possible speculative value, it also destroys the DAO, right? Because when the DAO token has gotten to the point where people don't think there's any more speculative price possibility that can happen on this token, two things happen. One, all rational token holders put their tokens up for sale because two, the price of this token is only ever going to go down from here, right? So your DAOs, of course, are sort of like driven to be productive, and that productivity gets represented in this speculative price. So if the DAO does well, the token price should go up, and if the token price gets high enough, everyone should exit the DAO, and that should kill the DAO. Right? So there's this really weird tension between this duality of the tokens where they're financial instruments and they're also governance instruments. There's also kind of another problem that arises from this. DAO tokens, when they're held by speculative holders, and we know there are a lot of speculative holders, view this as an asset. It's kind of like an asset that can be used as collateral. And today, generally, you can't use it as collateral. So a lot of people see it as an unproductive kind of asset. And what ends up happening is you end up exposing DAOs to this weird opportunity cost of holders who have to think about, is it worthwhile to have my capital inside this DAO token? And if this DAO token isn't returning any value, am I looking for an exit or some opportunity to be extracted? And this problem leads to the case that you see in ENS today, where the amount of money that it would take to purchase enough votes to steal the treasury is far below the actual value of the treasury. So you run into a case where it's cheaper to destroy a DAO to suck the treasury out of it. So you actually incentivize a very negative environment. And this has happened, right? This is what happened with nouns, when people looked at nouns and said, hey, the value of the treasury is higher than the pro rata value of the individual NFTs. Let's buy up the NFTs and steal the treasury. And that led to the nouns fork. But this also has happened with other projects, right? This is what happened with Aragon, right? That led to the collapse of Aragon and a number of other projects. So it's important to think of, like, there's this initial problem of the duality of the token, which makes DAO tokens unproductive financial assets and potentially speculative for extraction out of the DAO. What the Tally protocol does is it splits this duality. It says, hey, look, the DAO should maintain control of its security regardless of what the token price is. Right? The DAO should not be more or less secure based on daily fluctuations of the price. So we split the governance, the security of the DAO, away from the financial aspect, which is speculative holders who are just here on a lark, or they think they can make money, or, you know, whatever sort of things that they're trying to use their token as an asset or collateral. They should be able to do that without stealing security from the DAO. And moreover, the people who are here to participate, they should be rewarded for participating. The delegates are the people who are doing the hard work of operating the DAO, right? Some of these DAOs make, have Uniswap has $1 trillion of volume a year in this system, right? It's worth billions of dollars. Many of these protocols are worth a lot of money, but the participants in it don't receive any value for their hard work. And as a result, we see a lot of these communities trending towards very extractive behaviors, because there's a bit mismatch of the incentives in the beginning. So the Tally protocol, high level, realigns these incentives by breaking these two pieces apart, where we say, hey, the DAO should have control over its security, and token holders should have complete optionality on how they use and participate and speculate with the token. But these two things shouldn't cause problems for one another, right? We should split these two things.
Okay, so to get a little bit more granular into that, on the security side, how exactly does that look within the Tally protocol? And then also on the holder side, what are the holders' options now with Tally protocol that can solve a lot of the problems that you just outlined?
Yeah, so when we talk about holders' problems, it's really about eliminating opportunity cost. You don't need token holders to be thinking to themselves, what is this token worth? An example of this behavior is probably best exemplified in the airdrop, like in the seconds after the airdrop, where all these people get a token, they immediately sell it, right? Why? Because they have concluded that this is the moment where this token is at its maximum possible value, and the only logical thing to do is race to the exit. And that's kind of like a simplified example, but that's in essence what token holders have to always be considering when participating in these things, right? Because the tokens do have a price, and holders do have to understand them as being assets that they own, which are either productive or unproductive, regardless of how they participate in the DAO. So with the Tally protocol, what we do is there's a couple layers here, and one is staking, and then one is restaking. The staking layer is how we return value to token holders who participate in helping operate the DAO. This is very important. You don't return value to token holders who do fuck all, right? Like if you don't do anything, you're not participating, you're not doing anything in DAO, you're just hanging out for a pump to sell, or you don't care, you are not receiving any rewards from the protocol. You are not contributing. Staking allows us to identify the people who are working in the protocol and reward them. And you reward them by understanding who are they delegating to, and is their delegate an active delegate? Is their delegate doing work? So that's the core. And this is actually a big piece of what Uniswap staking solutions doing, right? You lock your tokens in the protocol and you delegate to someone, and now you're eligible to receive a portion of the protocol rewards, right? So this is the first piece, right? This is solving, okay, how do we align the fact that these people are working in an organization and they need to be compensated for all the work that they do? But staking introduces a new opportunity cost. And the opportunity cost here is you lock your tokens inside of staking protocols. And it's very important. The token has to be locked in there, right? Because that's how you're sort of guaranteeing that these people are aligned with the mission of operating the DAO. But now you have to tell token holders, okay, there's these rewards that are generated from your work in the DAO. But then there's these rewards that can be generated outside of the DAO from some other source, whether that be selling the token or, more importantly today, restaking, right? You can use your tokens in systems like Symbiotic to earn greater yield on your tokens. And now token holders have to choose. Do I stake my token in the protocol, or do I lock my token into restaking? And that's a new opportunity cost, because there's a danger here as well. If you stake your token to restaking, you can't vote with it. That's the sort of initial thing. You can either make money on your token or you can vote with your token, but you can't do both at the same time. So now users have to choose between staking and restaking sucking security away from the DAO. Because you can imagine a world where, let's say, half of Uni tokens are actually inside of Symbiotic or inside of Eigenlayer. Well, those tokens are giving up the share of rewards that they could get from the underlying protocol from their participation. But also the DAO now no longer has access to these tokens. Because we like to talk about DAO tokens as actually security. Not securities for everyone who's listening, but security for DAO, right? And what that is token holders exist to protect the organization. They exist to also govern the organization, and that's primarily the job of delegates. But DAOs need their token holders to be activated so that if there is a malicious proposal, they show up and vote no. These are the operators of protocols, right? DAOs depend on their token holders for the security of their protocol, because they are the ones that protect the protocol against malicious actions, right? People trying to drain the treasury, right? Well, what happens when all the tokens are locked in a third-party protocol that is paying the token holder some sort of, yield or revenue, but they're not able to vote or participate, and there's no incentive to vote or participate? Well, now the DAO loses its security to those protocols, right? And a great example is there's 168%, or it's around 168% of quorum for Uniswap in centralized exchanges and DeFi. So 168% of quorum is actually not available to Uniswap. And ironically, it is available to malicious actors who might want to purchase those tokens. Or, as we've seen in the past, exchanges sometimes delegate their users' tokens themselves. So actually, you have this weird situation where a decentralized protocol has 168% of its quorum on a centralized exchange. Very bizarre situation. And this is what leads to these security issues, right? So what the protocol here does is the protocol goes a level up above the staking and says, okay, look, you should be able to participate in the protocol, do work, have active delegates, vote, participate, earn rewards. But you shouldn't have to do that at the expense of doing something else productive with your asset, right? You should be able to do this and go participate in restaking and go use DeFi and go get a loan on your tokens and go put them in a centralized exchange. But you shouldn't be allowed to take the security of the DAO with you, because you clearly don't care about the security of the DAO, or this clearly isn't what your most important piece is, right? So the DAO should allow you to have this economic opportunity and utility on top of your tokens, but they should be able to hold on to their own security. And the protocol splits those two and allows the DAOs to own their security in the protocol, which basically means, to get a little bit more specific, the DAO gets to choose how the unused voting power gets redelegated in its own ecosystem.
Yeah, so you get the best of both worlds. It almost sounds too good to be true because it's not something we've had up until this point. Maurice had a question for you in the chat. How opinionated is Tally Protocol in terms of what constitutes participation? For example, does participation require actively voting on proposals, or do you have a different definition of participation?
So we are not very opinionated. The Tally Protocol is designed to not be very opinionated because this is a decision that belongs to the DAOs. One of the things that's important to understand about the Tally Protocol is it does not capture DAOs. And the liquid staked version of their token that the protocol creates belongs to the DAO. This is a permissionless open protocol. You can think of it like a public good. Anybody can come and create the canonical liquid staked version of any token. But the resulting token belongs to the community that it represents. It doesn't belong to the Tally Protocol. If someone comes and creates T-Uni belongs to Uniswap. So Tally, the Tally DAO itself, will create default redelegation voting strategies around what constitutes active, what constitutes productive, these types of things as placeholders. But what we expect is that the DAOs themselves will have their own standards for what they think constitutes an active, productive delegate. We think that this is a decision that belongs actually to the DAO holders. So the way that we're building the protocol, they can control that and make those changes and implement the kind of programs they would like to see. And to give just some suggestions of ideas here, there's a lot of different things you can do. The simplest thing is, do they vote, right? That's a pretty easy thing to gain. But then you can also do things like, do they vote? And this season, you say you can do kind of like a futarchy model where you can say, hey, this season we have some sort of goal for the DAO. And if the delegates hit that goal, they get the rewards, right? So the people who then participate get the rewards. You could take that extra voting power and you could say, hey, instead, what we'll do is we will lend this voting power out to new delegates on a quarterly process. And this is actually a program that my wife, Yana, at the Rare Foundation put together, a delegate launch pad where they say, hey, you're a new delegate, you don't have much voice yet, so we will lend you voting power on a decay curve that allows you to get started and boost your profile here in the ecosystem. So there's a lot of different ways that DAOs can choose to use that voting power because of their security, right? And they have the ability now to, choose a centralized option, choose a decentralized option, use a program, split it up in many different ways. We think it's up to them, and we think that people are going to build businesses on top of this.
Yeah, that's a really interesting example. Do you have any other examples of how certain DAOs have been structuring their governance and their delegation with Tally, just to give people more ideas about how they could experiment? Because there's so many ways, right? And there's like probably so many new ways that we haven't even experimented with yet. But just to get the juices flowing in people's minds about how they could experiment with their DAO, can you give any more interesting examples you've seen?
Sure. So there's one project that we're working on where folks are interested in using Karma. Karma is a project that creates scores for delegates based on their on-chain and off-chain activity. So that score can be used as a determinant of how active or how productive or how successful the delegate is. A16Z very famously delegates their voting power to university blockchain clubs. So they say, hey, we are going to give this voting power out to a large number of people in blockchain clubs. I think that is a very novel idea that has been very exciting and brought many new participants into the DAO ecosystem. They've been, responsible for creating many new delegates and foreign participants. So there's a lot of different things that we can do here. I personally sort of imagine a world of where we use like ZK proofs to show that people did things like come to conferences, participate in, community calls, did thoughtful contributions in forums, and sort of roll that all up. But at its simplest core, now the Tally protocol gives token holders a feedback mechanism to evaluate their delegate by, which is token holders now have a reward for participating in the protocol. And that reward is either going up or it's going down. And today, you don't really have any feedback mechanisms for success for DAO success and token holders, right? The best one is the price pumps and everybody sells their token. That's counterintuitive, right? Like, why would the DAO want this? And in fact, you see in many DAOs this very negative, extractive, short-term thinking, right? People are like, oh, why isn't there more marketing? Why is the price is going down? Do more partnerships, right? Or something to like pump the token so they can just sell and get out in the DAO's done, right? So now, though, these folks have a productive, useful asset. They have a reason to hold it just from a purely financial value. They have a reason to hold it and participate in the DAO. It does something that benefits them in a positive way. Well, now they can evaluate their delegates. They can see, am I being rewarded more? Am I being rewarded less? If I'm being rewarded less, you have a real time, you just look at your wallet and you say, oh, clearly the delegates aren't doing something right because this is going the wrong direction. Now they have a feedback mechanism at its base, which we think is going to be a very powerful mechanism for realigning the incentives in these organizations.
You mentioned earlier, too, that you could see businesses being built on Tally protocol. I'm curious what you have in mind for businesses that you see being built outside of typical DAOs that we're familiar with.
Yeah, so so following the stream of like how we reuse this voting power, there are a lot of professional delegates in the space who have a lot of ideas about how to reward delegates and how DAOs should operate. This gives them an opportunity to actually build a larger business and bring their ideas to DAOs in a financial way. A lot of these people end up working for free late nights in the forum. This gives them a tool that remunerates them for their hard work. So, like I sort of mentioned, you can imagine folks like Karma, they're a company that produces like a delegate score. They could build a module that says, hey, you can use this module, it takes X percent of like the reward here, and we'll help you calculate who is doing a good job in this organization. You could also imagine teams building sort of like proxy voting services, right? Where you could say, hey, maybe this kind of DAO doesn't really have such a large active community. Maybe it's extremely specialized. Well, you can come up with some sort of like proxy contract agreement where you have a professional organization that operates parts of the protocol based on this voting power that's been given to them by the speculative holders who don't want to participate. There's also another piece to the protocol, which is how the underlying token is this like auto compounding token. It's actually the staked version, the liquid stake version, is itself earning rewards. And there's a mechanism behind this where actually financial actors can go and build toolings around how to make them more efficient, how to claim, protocol revenue from across, the multiverse. There's a million different EVM chains, ways to do all sorts of different things. So there's a lot of opportunity here for people to build on top of the real liquidity advantage of the Tally protocol, where you will expect that the majority of the liquid stake versions of these protocol tokens will be in the Tally protocol, since it is aligned with the DAO, underlying DAO itself. It is the public infrastructure of the underlying DAO itself.
Yeah, it's really exciting, all the possibilities that the Tally protocol unlocks for DAOs and even businesses outside of the traditional DAO structure that we think of to, further expand their businesses, grow their community base, reward people, figure out better ways to do that, keep actually users in their ecosystem instead of, this like mercenary user that we've seen for so long who just wants to come in, make a quick buck and get out. Now businesses and DAOs can actually incentivize users in a more meaningful way. So it's super exciting. Do you have any final thoughts on Tally protocol that we haven't covered that you want to make sure people know?
Yeah, I think the last piece that I would share is the opportunity here with restaking. Now you can build really new things. So, if you think of like an L2 like Arbitrum, you can create liquid staked ARBs, a T-ARB, that you can now put into restaking and use the economic security of Arbitrum to back decentralized services like decentralized sequencers or validators or data availability. So you actually open up an entirely new realm of infrastructure that people can build inside their own ecosystems, right? This really supercharges the things that you can build on top of Arbitrum, on top of Wormhole, on top of Uniswap, right? Where you can say, hey, I am building some servicer for Uniswap and I'm going to back it with the Uni token itself as the security component for that. That's really exciting for token holders, right? Like talk about like utility for, all right, participating governance And I can also secure these services that power the protocol itself. This is really exciting, just like greenfield of new opportunity. And I really wanted to share that because that's like the next part of this, which really fully actualizes the token holders' experience of participating in their DAO.
Absolutely. Yeah, super exciting. And then last thing, tell people where they can go to learn more about this, to dive into it, to check it out for themselves, maybe join some DAOs or launch their own DAO on Tally.
Yeah. So the best place to go is to tally.xyz. We'll have a little banner up where you can learn more about the protocol. We have a mint going on Zora for the protocol poster. I highly recommend you going out and getting a commemorative mint of the poster. It's a great way of letting us know your commitment to the idea. So yeah, tally.xyz. You can also find us on our Twitter, tallyxyz.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Dennison, for taking the time. Thanks, everybody, for tuning into this mini hash episode about Tally Protocol. Go check it out. Explore it for yourselves now that you've heard all the possibilities that it unlocks. Go and test it out. Experiment. And we will talk to you soon on another episode of Rehash.